The F1 22 game will not have a story mode or a continuation to Breaking Point. Instead, we can expect one for F1 23. Now, I think I mentioned this before in my predictions on the run-up to F1 22 being announced, that I did not think we were going to get a story mode this year, and lo and behold, we are not. Because if you follow the pattern of the development of the Formula 1 game over the last couple of years, you can see there is a clear difference of when they put the story mode in. At first, we had that very small, kind of almost like a prologue style story mode in F1 2019, with the first kind of, any sort of cutscenes, the introduction, the first time we saw Devin Butler and Lucas Weber, those beloved characters in F1 2019. Then there was a year break. F1 2020 saw the introduction of F1 My Team, career mode, and then the next year, F1 2021, last year's F1 game, had Breaking Point. So following that pattern, we are going to get a story mode in F1 23, and that was the kind of prediction and the logical thinking I had before the announcement. And now after that, with that recent presentation a bunch of creators and journalists had for F1 22, before we got our hands on this preview build at the moment that we're making videos on, Lee Mather did answer that and did kind of, confirm, and as I've been told before privately by Codemasters employees, there is a split development team under Codemasters. They essentially have two halves of a team. In a kind of cyclical way, they make one after the other. So you've got one development team making F1 2020, and then they're making F1 22 this year, and at the moment, as they're finishing off and making sure F1 22 goes gold in the next month before the release in July, there's another half in the studio making and developing F1 23. So whatever the story mode, sequel to Breaking Point, whatever it is, right now is still being developed and is already in development by Codemasters, but we're not going to see it until F1 23. So that's the way it's working. So you can expect a story mode, probably very much so, in next year's game, but that is the reason why we're not getting it. And in a recent interview on the Traction.gg website, Lee Mather alluded to, the reasoning why that, and you can kind of guess it already, but things like just the fact it takes a lot of time to develop the actual story bits of the game, because you've got, obviously, the normal gameplay mechanics of the F1 game of you driving around and doing the scenarios, but the cutscenes, the high-end CGI, it all takes, well, first of all, you have to cast the actors, the voice actors, or even the actual, the people they use for the faces as well, for the face scans and whatever. You've got to actually get them to do the acting and whatever. You've got to let the writers script out the story, because they did get proper writers to write out the storyline of Breaking Point, for example. So if they're looking to, further that and make it even grander and bigger for the next time they bring in a story mode, which I hopefully think they do, they make it an even longer story or more developed or more intricate, they're going to have further time to maybe do more writing for a longer story, obviously maybe get further characters. I think also the potential of moving on to a new engine is also a good reason why they want to keep the next iteration of story mode onto F1 23, because we are still running on the current Ego engine that Codemasters themselves develop in-house for all their racing games. It's the same Ego engine that has been with the game since, I believe, F1 2015. It has been slightly adapted going onto these new consoles. Lee Mather, when F1 2021 came out, and that was the first game that was going to launch directly onto PS5 and Xbox Series X, he said at the launch of that, like a year ago now, that they were basically adapting the Ego engine to work for the new consoles and kind of having that stability, because the last time they redid and remade an engine, we got F1 2014 to 15, and if you were around on YouTube watching my videos back then, you'll know how painful it was. I mean, F1 2015 was such a painfully, bare bones game that it didn't have career mode, and that's how F1 My Driver even came about, is because I had to fashion my own career mode out of Grand Prix mode, because when they made that move over to the new engine, it basically meant they had to take a step back and rebuild the building blocks of the game, essentially. That seems to be a correct assumption and kind of way to look at it, because writing for Xputer.com, Tom Henderson, an industry insider and very well known for getting things right when it comes to EA in terms of how, things are going to end up in their game, essentially, and recently, correctly predicted things coming out from Codemasters and EA with regards to Need for Speed and that franchise. It seems like F1 23 is going to be that next gen new engine step up, essentially. So that's not really, you know, that surprising, to be honest. I think we could have guessed that. It kind of makes sense, like I said, the idea of if you're doing the next iteration of story mode, why not, you know, you've got that 2 year, you've got that, you know, every other year gap, why not then finally use that year gap then to get onto the new engine finally, make that step up, not only for the whole game, but then the story mode itself in a new engine could probably perform better, look better, be a bit grander as well. And also, unrelated to the story mode, but he says allegedly that they're going to be looking to expand on F1 Life kind of already. I guess they're maybe hoping it's going to be a success, and they're going to be expanding on it maybe even further to F1 World. And he says private jets, anyone, question mark? So I can't really speak on that. I'm not going to comment on that. That's, you know, we'll see what happens basically. We haven't even got F1 Life yet, but, you know, he's got a track record of being correct. But in terms of the next gen stuff, that's the main focus of this video, is the story mode and next gen, and where is it? So it's not on this year's game. It's going to be, I think, very much so on next year's game, F1 23, and it's going to be a next gen upgrade. So let me know what you guys make of that. I, for one, actually like the fact they've moved to this model of every other, because it does give them time to flesh out a story mode. You can tell Breaking Point took a lot of time to make. It was a very well-crafted thing, very much so for Codemasters, very way and kind of a step up in quality from maybe what we've seen, you know, with cutscenes, let's say, because they used the, you know, the outsourcing of CGI teams and whatever, and it made for a really, really good playthrough, especially for casual fans especially, but even me as a hardcore player, I enjoyed playing through it, and I enjoyed, obviously, making videos for you guys to present it to you. So, for next year's game, I'm massively excited for whatever they make up with the story mode, and I like the fact they're giving themselves times, because sports titles, every year, it's intense, man, and that means sometimes the quality could slip. So I like the fact they're having that gap stop. It's almost, I liken it to how Call of Duty have 3 developers, and they kind of, you know, do every, you know, well, it used to be every other year, but now they've got 3, so now it's kind of like a 2-year gap before it's your chance to make the next Call of Duty. It's almost like that, but it's in-house. It all under Codemasters, but they've just got their internal 2 separate development teams. But of course, doesn't mean that the 2 games are different. Of course, the 2 games feed into each other, because, you know, I'm sure features that are on this year's game, like F1 Life, allegedly, will still be in F1 23 and will be expanded upon. So core gameplay parts that are in the game on those, you know, odd years where there's not a story mode, they can be fleshed out and improved upon and still be put into the game with the story mode, because, you know, that team maybe is spending more time on the story mode, not really bothering with the other stuff, because it's already being developed essentially the year before by the other half of the team. So that's the kind of state of play when it comes to the F1 game and the story mode, because I know quite a few people are still questioning, you know, are we going to get a story mode? You know, what's happened to it? Why did we not get a sequel? So now, you know, those are the reasonings, and that's the kind of logical roadmap I think we can kind of guesstimate for the next, you know, year or more of the F1 games, basically. If you guys did find it informative, then be sure to hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and like I said, what do you make of this, you know, cycle we essentially now have with the F1 games? And what do you want to see in the story mode for next year? Do you want to see a sequel to Breaking Point, or a completely new storyline? And are you excited to finally get a new engine, you know, big step up for next year's F1 game? And if you aren't around here, get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. My last and final F1 22 gameplay video from that preview build will be coming out at the start of next week, so look out for that. Till then, guys, hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.